Torrential rains have caused the deaths of 4 persons and more than 8,000 persons displaced between last Saturday and Monday as floods from both Jebba and Kenji dams ravage Lapai local government area of Niger State.
Yeah, as the flood situation worsens, residents are calling for humanitarian aid because 35 communities are currently submerged in the flood. Now, according to them, they had to engage the services of boats and canoe operators to evacuate stranded villagers to public facilities in the upland. And
it's not only Lapai we're talking about.
We're talking about
right here in Lagos.
Of course.
Same flooding situation.
We've had in Katsina, we've had in parts of Benue, we've had even in Ogun State, Osun State, and even parts of Delta as well. Now, joining us in the studio is environmentalist John Ekoko. We have had him several times to enlighten Nigerians on this. John, good morning.
It's
nice to have you join us. Here we are again. Now, we've been talking about this flood issues for some time now. I know you've been monitoring the situation. Has there been any decisive or proactive measure by any agency or any level of government in any of this part of the country that you have seen so far from the warnings we have received?
No reasonable action has been taken. Either at the federal, at the state, or at the local government level. It's unfortunate. There have been series of meetings, committees, either by the Hydrological Society, either by NEMA, either by the UN itself, you know. As at September last year, the Hydrological Society, Nigerian Hydrological Society, called a meeting of stakeholders where they gave a warning that the rains will be at least 60% higher this year, that they should prepare for floods. The DG of NEMA, Meilaji, followed up and called on all the levels of government to come up with an action plan as of September 2017. Even that one is too late, but at least it was a clarion call that there's danger lurking. I did not see any concrete action. What I rather saw was a situation where mass evacuation without providing alternatives is the issue. Secondly, untaught infrastructural development that is further compounding the problem, particularly in Lagos. Look at the Oworoshoke Bridge, the proposed tourism center. There's been so much dredging and sand filling around there.
Yes.
The residents there are crying. It is unfortunate. Now, I talk about flooding every time, and thanks for inviting me. But let's calm down a bit. The UN held a conference in May 2018 where they talked about adaptive action. Now, there were a lot of points made. We know the effect of climate change. We know the effect of rural-urban migration. And this disruptive development. Now, it was said that the problem we have is that we are fighting water. We should be cooperating with water.
In other words, adapting to the
environment
whatever
as it
developments
is. Fantastic.
That will come up with.
Take the Nordic lands. Take the Nordic lands. They are also below sea level. In fact, worse than we are. They've been able to plan across communities, to bring various groups together, to plan for all the communities together. So you don't solve this and create problem here.
The other one.
Do you understand? And the next thing is to say, okay, this water, This is its habitat. So how do we accommodate the water so that we also can survive? And do what? Maybe either abide, flourish. You know what I'm trying to say?
So with this land reclamation and dredging that's going on in places like Lagos and other parts of the country, is that really what is a major cause of
what
this
the UN
problem?
is saying is,
yes,
you don't go and start dredging in an area or sand filling without engaging the locals who live there. Sometimes I got to have adaptive communities. Do you understand?
yes.
Now what we have is that suddenly from above, there's an order given. Do you understand? And the residents of a particular community are moved away. And if they refuse, like there was a particular community, maybe even
like the Ekoko area, for example.
Exactly. You get what happens? Either the flood washes them away, or they start to beg boats and canoe operators to come and save them. This Oworoshoki is so bad that when the sand filling started, the rains not only took over the house, diseases, do you get the point? Also ravaged those people. A lot of the amenities around there had to close down. They couldn't operate.
All right, when you talk about providing an alternative, usually for residents or those who live in the on the water path or the right of way of water and all of that, what does it really take to provide an alternative?
Thank you.
Because people live there permanently, it's their home, and when you talk about providing alternative, one visualizes either building new house settlements and all of that, but that takes a lot of time.
It's a long-term project. Yeah.
I said the UN report in May addressed this succinctly.
Okay.
I'll give you a few instances. Durban, Lagos, Abidjan, Alexandria, and a few cities were marked out as flood-prone cities.
All in Africa?
Yes. Right. Now, Tema in Ghana was not among. Tema spent $20 million, was it $210 million, to address the problem of flooding. How much did Lagos spend? How much did Nigerian federal government spend? Nigerian government spent about $8 billion all over Nigeria. Meanwhile, there are a lot of cities that have been earmarked to be affected by flooding. Lagos spent about how many hundreds of millions? Tema was not among the cities. You know, Ghana was not even mentioned. It tells you about proactiveness. Number two, right? When you take the residents of these communities, what level of awareness do they have? Sensitization is next to zero. And that increases vulnerability. I don't know that I'm communicating.
Yes.
And we are talking about inclusive, adaptive planning. The people who live there, they definitely have some knowledge that can be useful in planning. And like I said earlier, to what extent have we tried to cooperate with the waters in their natural habitat? You want to drive water away? If you drive it away from point A,
it goes to B.
It goes to always find this level.
In the meantime, you know, it's interesting you even talk about the UN, because they came out with a report recently and they said African countries, Africa as a whole, actually has been more affected by, you know, the impact of climate change.
Yes.
And like you said, what exactly are leaders doing to, you know, try to mitigate the impact of climate change? When you talk about engaging some of the people in the communities, for example, the Ekoko one, the government did try to, you know, relocate them for different reasons beyond the issue of flooding and all of that, because those areas where they stay, real slum.
Yeah, very slum.
And then you have NGOs who come up and, you know, raise placards and, you know, and say, no, we will not have this. Government is being insensitive and all of that. It almost puts government in a tight situation, don't you think?
The UN said in that same report,
yes,
relocation should be the very last option.
The very last option. So what would be the initial options then
Number one, there is this scale of planning. You have the short, medium, and long-term plan. There should be a long-term plan. Fortunately, with technological advancement, you can see a lot of things well ahead. It is the will that has a problem. It is the will. I also mentioned, right, that it's like the more enlightened you are, the more value you place on your life. The Lekki residents, the VGC residents will not keep quiet and permit some of these things. They will engage the government from the beginning to the end, whatever it takes. Who in Makoko is that enlightened? The second thing.
But even in Lekki, where you have very enlightened people, I mean, you still have cases of flooding and all of that, where the basic infrastructure that really should be in place is not there. Drainage, for example, and what have you. These are the enlightened.
At least we've seen the use of canoes.
In Lekki, in
Lekki, Victoria Island.
Yes. But one of the things they are not doing is that they are not sitting down. In VGC particularly, they've had to buy 2 pumping machines worth millions. So that when the rain is falling and the water level is rising, what happens? The machines pump the water back to the lagoon.
Okay.
And there's a backstopper. To that extent, it has what? Protected not only their lives, their properties.
And this is the effort of residents.
Residents, yes, not government. I know the efforts they've made to engage government many times without success. When you go and build across a water course, blocking a water path, they scream. In Makoko, nobody talks. Now, one of the things also is to empower these communities. Even in finances, give them some little leverage to be able to raise funds for themselves. You know, like I said, the level of enlightenment is very low. And don't forget the slum effect. By 2050, 70% of Africa will be in the cities, 30% in the rural areas. Will
they be real cities or glorified cities, or glorified slums?
Slum alone will take about 80%. That is the sad thing.
It's a very serious situation.
Do you get what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So these are problems that you know. Start to put something on ground to tackle it in the next 10 years. Why I feel sad is that if you go to the literature, there is so much work being done. And let's not forget, the flooding today is a washing effect we are looking at. It washes away things, washes away people. A time comes when it overtakes the groundwater level, the underground water, and that water becomes salty. You will not have water to drink again.
So it's going to have real
effect.
What is the impact of the boreholes that have been drilled all over the place, especially in places in Abuja, in Lagos, and all of that?
The boreholes, they are going to create their own disaster. It is waiting to happen. It is unregulated interference with the underground water level. The government knows that it is a problem. There should be a plan to provide potable water so that the underground level can what? Be maintained. Some areas will become liable to collapse. No, the borrow problem is a talk for another day.
Yeah.
And people have been talking. Nobody has been keeping quiet. But what do we see? Like in Lagos, they won't provide you with water. When you not dig your own borehole, they will slam a very heavy charge on you.
It's not just in Lagos. So you could say the same for all around.
You see, so
all around the country.
Let's even talk about, do we have the expertise really to, you know, be more proactive like they've done in the Netherlands, in places like Venice and what have you? Do we really have the expertise? Or is it a question of lack of willpower? And how do we, at the individual level, you know, check this climate change problem? In September alone, it's been raining every day.
Thank you.
Every day. What do we do to help ourselves?
I believe we have the expertise because we are looking at adaptive technology. Are you with me? In other words, that you adapt which works differently in different environments.
Okay.
So the problem is not like the waste management in Lagos, where the PSPs, they were not doing excellently, but they were able to take care of the problem. And suddenly somebody came with a brainwave that there is one expert somewhere abroad who can solve all the problems, and in our broad visionscape. That is the sort of situation we have here.
Okay,
so
you know what?
That's
we'll
another topic.
Yes.
That's another topic for another day.
Yes, we'll have to
John Ekoko,
bring you back definitely to talk more about this, because we're still facing the challenges of flooding all across the country.
Thank you very much for coming on the program. Right.